You're very welcome back to this week's Unfiltered Autistic Podcast. And I can't quite believe it, as maybe Luke has already noticed before I came on the podcast saying hello at very fast pace. So I can't quite believe that this week, for the first time ever, hopefully not for the last, although he may decide to run away once he starts talking to me for a while, but for the first time ever, I have Dr Luke Beardon here on the podcast. And if you've ever heard me speak on autism or recommend anything in particular books, you'll definitely have heard this gentleman's name, and you'll definitely have seen his picture because it appears at least once in every slide deck, if not twice, that I've ever used on autism or spoke about autism. So what I will say from the very start is that Mr. Bearden has absolutely changed my life as an autistic person, my family's life as autistic children and teenagers, but also I know many families and many schools and many educators and SNAs that I speak to, and they go away, especially with that particular theory, autism plus environment equals the outcome. It has really changed many, many lives. So I'll hand back over to you, Luke. I'll slow down my speaking so you can understand me. But I suppose for anybody listening, do you want to give them maybe a little bit of a little taster about who you are, and I suppose how maybe you're here today, if that makes sense?
Oh, thank you so much, Amanda. And you speak as quickly as you want. I'm more than used to it. Don't worry. That was a lovely introduction. I haven't got much to add, really. My name's Luke. I first knowingly stumbled across the autism field when I was aged 14 as a volunteer in a special school. Turns out I had all sorts of other connections I hadn't realised, which I worked out later on in life. And I've been working in various different roles for, over 30 years I wouldn't say professional, because I wouldn't really regard myself as a professional, but within a professional capacity. And I'm currently a senior lecturer in autism at Sheffield Hallam University. So I run the postgraduate certificate in autism, and I teach on the masters in autism, and I have loads of PhD students as well, most of whom are autistic.
I feel like saying the lucky students. Wouldn't I love to be a student in your class? My gosh. I suppose, Luke, getting, really into it, because I know there'll be a lot of parents, professionals, but also autistic people themselves listen to the podcast. I suppose one of your main theories, and again, sorry to anyone that doesn't like my drawing, but I'm going to produce it now. I drew this of Mr. Bearden there during the week. First of all, clearly I have too much time in my hands. And now that I see, I'm like, I didn't get the lightness exactly right. But look, I tried. That's the main thing. But I suppose one of the key theories that I even referred to at the start, there's lots of different things, I suppose, that you've really helped a lot of people understand. And what I really like about what you do as a professional, as an academic, is that you derive really complex theories, but you make it accessible to everybody. Because for many years, if we look at like the archaic way of, unfortunately, the way people that are autistic or people that were supporting autistic people viewed autistic people or viewed how to support them, the blame, so that blame culture that you talk about in your books, it was like, oh, the autistic person needs to change, oh, the autistic person got it wrong. But then when you came along with autism plus environment equals the outcome, I was like, hello, I got goosebumps even as I said. I was like, hello, this man is so correct. But I suppose you came out with that theory many years ago, and now it's literally, everyone is like, yes, this makes sense. It's like, it's taken on life its own. How do you feel about kind of, I suppose, first of all, where that theory came from for you, and then also where it is today, many years later?
So it's that kind of weird juxtaposition between everybody knows that if you're autistic, and you can't change that. Like, it's one of the you'll know yourself, Amanda, there's so few things in the autism field that we can all agree on. But we can all agree that you're born autistic, you live autistic, and you die autistic. That's like, well, I hope we can all agree on that. If you're sitting there thinking, oh no, you can change it, well, you're clearly in the wrong. So that's one of the very, very few things that we can all agree on. So you can't change being autistic. And as we also know, like, autistic people are individuals, and I don't know why we keep needing to remind ourselves that autistic people are individuals, but we seem to keep having to push that narrative. And yet, as an autistic population, there are clear themes and trends which aren't applicable to all autistic people. But, for example, we know that if you're autistic, you are at much higher risk of being highly anxious and having trauma and facing, kind of burnout, and you're probably more at risk of masking and all of those. So we know there's loads and loads and loads of themes which aren't necessarily specific to the individual. And I sort of couldn't get my head around this, because I was thinking, well, what is it then? Like, because I remember this ages and ages ago, I wrote an article for the newspaper, got picked up by the papers, and I can't remember what the title was. I got loads of complaints about it, but like, I think people just didn't really understand it. All I was saying was, if somebody tells you they're autistic, you know nothing about them apart from the fact that they are autistic. I was trying to get across the point that just because they're autistic, you literally don't know anything about them apart from they are autistic. You can't read anything into it. Like, being autistic, you do, at an individual level. And so then I was thinking, but if we want to change the outcome, if we want to reduce anxiety, if we want to reduce trauma, if we want to reduce risk of suicide, and we can't change somebody being autistic, what else is there to change? So that's when I came up with the what I self-professed golden equation: autism plus environment equals outcome. Because autism does not equal outcome in and of itself. Otherwise, all autistic people would follow the same path, and that's clearly not the case. So autism in isolation just means you're autistic. Brilliant, well done, fantastic. That doesn't tell you anything else. However, clearly outcomes for autistic people are often shared. So what is it about that? So when I first wrote about that equation, I was thinking, okay, well, what is it? If you've got the autism plus environment equals outcome, and we agree that that is a justifiable equation, I think I mean, it is. You could put person plus environment equals outcome, and it would equally be true. What is it then about? If we want to change the outcome, what do we need to do? Because it was doing my head in, coming across so many situations, doesn't matter what age group, of you're the one in the wrong, you've got to change, being autistic is not good enough, being autistic is somehow lesser, you're the one that's the problem, when it was complete nonsense. It was crystal clear to me throughout like the whole of my life, really, that there's nothing inherently wrong with being autistic. I mean, that would be bonkers to suggest, and yet that is the very clear message of being autistic, that you are in the wrong. So I wrote a mini poem once for a presentation, conform to the norm or be deemed in the wrong, which is terrible because it doesn't even rhyme. But anyway, but that is kind
of a statement, though.
It is, yeah, it's a statement then, yeah, but much better off as a statement. So this kind of level of conformity, and it's some of it is overt, some of it is very, very subliminal. You know, it's kind of like, nice sitting in primary school. What does nice sitting mean? If
quiet
you're
hands,
ADHD, quiet hands, all of those sorts of things, or you know, like the concept of being polite, for example. And it struck me that there are so many different lenses that you can understand a similar situation in, and actually looking at things through the autistic lens gives you an incredibly different perspective in terms of what's going on. And actually there's absolutely categorically nothing wrong with understanding the child through that lens, and then go, okay, well, if we want to change the outcome, if we want to reduce anxiety, for example, don't look at the child, don't look at the adult, look at the environment, and then break the environment down into its component parts, part of which is the individual self and their understanding of self, but most of it is the people around them, the environment around them, the sensory environment around. Change all that, take the focus away from the individual, change all the environment, and all of a sudden the outcome will look after itself. And it's a much, much healthier way of doing things. It takes all of that horrible ableist kind of you need to change away from the child, and you end up with happy autistic individuals, which is the whole point, really.
And it really kind of, I think, in a very safe way, asks, say, educators, parents, professionals, whoever, to kind of have that reflective kind of practice to be, well, if that's the outcome, what's my role in that environmental piece? What is it that I am or I amn't? And it's actually given me kind of, and I suppose, an emboldenedness to say, actually, we don't really have people come to visit. I hope you don't mind, but actually, it's really important for my family that we don't, but we'll happily meet you somewhere else. So it's, even as an autistic person, it's made me feel a little bit more confident in my own knowledge base of what I can and can't do. Do you ever find that with parents that you support, or maybe from, I suppose, autistic adults that maybe even in your courses that happen to be parents, that has it helped them in that regard?
100%. I think like that concept of safety, that concept of authenticity, safety, and time, being allowed to, and joining those three together. So being given safe space and time to be your authentic self is, I hate to say it, but it's a gift. Because, and the reason I hate to say it is because most children and adults actually aren't afforded that. Yes. They're not given that safety and space and authenticity, and yet most other people do. They it's just a natural. You talk to what I call the predominant neurotype about like the concept of those sorts of things. They look at you as if, well, yeah, that just happens. That happens all the time. No, it's like as autistic people aren't allowed that, and so you're always on the back foot. You've always got that level of agitation, that level of distress, that level of chaos, that level of unpredictability being given. And also there's so much I could honestly, we're gonna have to keep an eye on the time, we'll be here forever, but so what you were saying now is amazing, that you've created that like autism safe haven at home. But that constant judgment from the outside world, like especially when it's age related, we need to get rid of the concept of age and autism. Like
For sure.
there's just, it makes no sense whatsoever. Like I don't know if people can see, or if just hearing it. Like you're talking to a 54-year-old man with pictures of Moomins on behind him, like, and
I
everything.
thought that's what they were. Oh my God. I watched the cartoon when I was, well, I'm not young now. Many years ago, I watched that. That was such a cool
Oh, no,
show.
no, everything has to be Moomin related.
Oh,
Otherwise,
cool.
quite
Oh,
like
should we look at
quite
my
a thought.
office? I love rainbows. The whole thing is like very
100%. But
rainbow
like
and yellow doors.
when it comes to particularly autistic kids, but autistic adults as well, it's kind of like you're 6, you need to be doing things in this way.
Mm.
You're 9, you should be doing things in this way. And again, that goes back to that very ableist perspective of not differentiating your own lens to understand that particular human at that particular time. And if you're on that back foot, you're always, always, always playing catch up, which then has a knock on effect of you always, 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 in inverted commas, failing against those other norms, those ableist norms, and feeling worse and worse about yourself, which then makes your brain clutter get even more chaotic, which means you're even less likely to try and reach those goals the next day. So you're at that awful vicious cycle of that downward spiral. Whereas if, like, I absolutely love the whole concept of understanding life through the autism lens, going, hang on a minute, I've got another kind of mantra, if you like, that everything, and by everything I mean literally everything, needs translating before applying to the autistic individual. Because if it works for most people, then by definition, if you're not most people, then it's at risk of not working. So it needs to be changed. So for everything from communication to how we understand, what I can't remember which book I read about this. This gorgeous, like, it just gets me in the heart every single time. Real life example, and it was from at the time a non-speaking young lady and a mum, and a mum's like, and I love doing these internal dialogues when I'm writing, so sort of getting insight into what the person's really thinking. And the mum's saying, I just don't understand why my daughter doesn't love me. My son is so expressive and he hugs me and he tells me. My daughter, she just seems very indifferent. And she's going on like this, all about love, like, from a mum around a daughter. And then you've got the daughter's voice going, I just don't understand. When I stand this close to my mum and put my head that close to her shoulder, I would never do that to any other human being in the entire world. How did she not realise that I love her so desperately much? And it's like just such a gorgeous, I think, a gorgeous way of encapsulating. You've got one situation and you've got two completely different perspectives, and they both can't be right. And I think, like, going back to the Autism Plus Environment Equals Outcome, and it's amazing hearing you talk about it. And if I was to die tomorrow and that was a legacy, and people picked up on it, then that's really cool. Because the sooner we stop forcing autistic people into kind of behavioural norms and non-autistic authenticity, the better, I think.
And I think that lends itself very well. I was going to mention the piece about the translation, but actually you've mentioned it there. I think it lends itself very well into another topic that you will often talk about, that's autistic safety. And that's, I suppose, me calling the house the home is the haven. It's coming back to creating a safe space where once my boys come in the door, they come in, the bags are thrown down, the shoes are thrown down. And if I was a different parent, I'd be like, oh, put away your bags, put away your shoes. But I'm like, I just feel it's like they're like unmasking as they come in the door. And it takes me, less than a minute to pick them up and put them away myself. They come in. My middle son Jack would also have like a demand avoided profile. So the minute he comes into the house, he goes into his room. I have like his snacks and his things left out for him. He goes in playing with his dinos. As you say, like, he's 11, nearly 12, but he has a real fascination with his dinos. It's real passion, interest. He'll go in there doing that. Nobody disturbs him. He does that. My son Max, who has ARFID as well, he goes onto the couch. He has a little snack that he can kind of, tolerate and enjoy. Nobody bothers him. My son Connor, who's my eldest boy, a teenager, he goes into his room. And again, he's 15, but he loves, oh my gosh, I can't think of the show, Miss Rachel. It's like she, a lot of her programming is particularly directed towards, say, the preschool age, but he's like 15. He has an intellectual disability, loves it. He does his thing. He has his snacks. So each of the boys comes in, do their own thing. I don't ask them to do one thing once they come in the door. I leave out the food, leave out the things. I want them to just, they're now home. Home is like, school are fabulous, to be honest, but just home is the haven. They come in, and once once they kind of de-stress and they're feeling like, okay, then they start to engage with me or whatever. But I have it ready for them. And if, say, I was working today, my husband would have it ready or my daughter would have it ready. It has been the same routine, I suppose, I would say, since time began, since they started school. And when they're ready, they come out of the rooms. Max will hop off the couch, Connor comes out of his, and then they all kind of circulate again around the house. But it comes back to Quite literally, again, it's like listening to the actual overarching themes and knowledge bases that support me as a parent, and that is autistic safety. For anyone listening that doesn't really understand maybe what you meant by that, or hasn't, had the privilege out of reading one of your books, do you want to maybe provide maybe some information on that, whether it's an educator or a parent perhaps that might be listening?
So most people often feel safe quite a lot of the time. So if you talk to the average population and say, oh, when was the last time you felt unsafe? They're very often able to tell you because of a specific event. They say, oh yeah, a month ago I was out on a Friday night and I walked past these drunk people and I felt a bit stressed and I crossed the road. It's like, well, a month ago, you felt unsafe a month ago, and you're able to remember that because it was quite a significant, part of your life. You talk to most autistic people and they're like, well, what do you mean? I don't feel safe ever, or I feel unsafe when I wake up, or I feel unsafe when, oh God, like if you wanted to stress me out, phone me from a withheld number. Oh, why is that even allowed? Or I felt unsafe when I had to go to school, or whatever. And it's like an ongoing, the opposite of a friend that's hanging on to you
It's like
constantly.
that, the electric shock feeling you get when you get a fright. Like I get that throughout the day. Every now and again, you're
Yeah,
just like, whatever it's
yeah,
about. If I had to leave the house and go somewhere unexpected, I'd be like,
yeah,
oh gosh, that kind of feeling.
absolutely. And what I find interesting, so this is why in Autism Plus Environment Equals Outcome, the first component of the environment is understanding of self. When you talk to autistic people, very often they'll give you these stories, amazing stories, and then they're like, well, hang on, isn't everybody like that? And like even the concept of actually life shouldn't be like that for you. You should feel safe most of the time. It's like completely alien to so many autistic people because being in a world that is not set up for them often makes them feel very unsafe. And it's like, well, that like that call for you need to fit into this society to be made worthy, that your worth is dependent on all of these things. If you've got a really good understanding of self, then your genuine authentic autistic self, which I think is the name of my next book anyway, but anyway,
I'll be
what's
buying
it
it.
called now? What did I wrote it today. Anyway, something about understanding the
Cool.
authentic autistic self, how to love authenticity, something along those lines. But it gives
Amazing.
you the armor to work out, okay, what is right for me, what is not necessarily right for me. So the rest of the world going, you need friends, you need to do this, you need to read this many books, you've got to stop watching television, you've got to you need to do this much exercise, oh, otherwise you're never going to be happy. It's like, hang on a minute, that might apply to you, it might not apply to me. So the closer you have in terms of understanding your own authenticity or your child's authenticity or the kid in your class's authenticity or whatever, the closer you have to saying, okay, well, now I can start judging the parameters against which to understand what we might want to or not want to do in terms of our own well-being. And the more you can do that, the less unsafe you're going to feel because you're not one of the things I think so many autistic people put themselves into unsafe situations and it doesn't go very well. And then the next day, literally or figuratively, they do the same thing. And everyone's going, well, that didn't work yesterday. Why are you doing it again today? And it's not because they didn't learn from what happened yesterday. It's because the parameters against which they're making those decisions are not specific to them. They're specific to everybody else. It's like, well, you told me I need to go and make friends and it all went horribly wrong in the playground, but you're still telling me to make friends today. So I've still got to try and do it. I'm a good autistic person. I'm doing what you're asking me to do. And it's still going horribly wrong. As opposed to, maybe at this age and at this stage in my life, I don't really care about friends, and it's okay to go and have that safe space at school, which might be in the library, or it might, or whatever, or it might be the complete opposite. You love having friends, and that's the best time. Whatever it is for you, but unless you understand that authenticity for either yourself or for the other individual, then you're going to be at risk of feeling unsafe a lot of the time. And giving people I don't know, the confidence to stand up to that. It is almost like a tirade of this is how you need to be as a human being. Like in the internet's full of it. And, da, da, da. And again, if that's 99% of humans, as opposed to you being in a neuro minority, then you can safely then go, I can forget about that 99% of information because it's not applicable to me. But that isn't how the world works. You're expected to take that 99% and apply it to you, even though it doesn't work because you're in that neuro minority. So developing those narratives around actually there is a different way of thinking, there's a different way of behaving, there's a different way of being, there's a different, and it's perfectly okay and it's brilliant, it's fantastic, and it's disadvantageous because you're in a minority group. So we've got to be honest, it is disadvantageous. That doesn't make it bad. And actually developing those confidences to go, nah, I'm all right. I don't think I will have friends actually, or like I love the whole concept of autistic energy and how you can actually chart autistic energy and go, okay, well, so there's you might so I've created 9 types of energy because I like everything in sets of 3s, which is why I've got to write a 9th book. But anyway, that aside, so you've got 9 types of energy. So one of them might be social energy. So social energy, you would think, okay, what is people? But it's not just people, because you can't say, well, people stress me out, or I love people, or like individual people are different things. So me talking to you on a podcast might massively energize me, and I'm like, oh yeah, I got loads and loads of energy over a short period of time. I couldn't do it every day, but now and again, maybe once every 6 months, I'd love to dive back into that and have another half an hour or 40 minutes with Amanda. Somebody else, I might be like, oh my goodness, that person was such a mood over, I never want to see them again. Or somebody else will be like, yeah, no, that you're great once a year, or actually, no, you're just delicious, and I love sitting with you and not saying a word, and you just completely recharge my batteries. We can chart these things, like we can literally chart those things to then make people feel safer in terms of, okay, well, now my decision is, what do I do tomorrow? And the thing about energy that it drives me, I don't understand why people don't pick up on this more. If you expend a lot of energy one day, you're going to be more knackered the next. Like I am fortunate enough to enjoy doing triathlons. I'm not very good at them, but if I do a long triathlon, like one day, and I'm racing for 15 hours or whatever, the next day I can't stand up. Nobody would expect it. Oh, you did a long Ironman yesterday. Can you do another one today, please? They wouldn't dream of doing that. They'd be like, oh yeah, you put your feet up for a week or whatever. And yet we expect a kid to go to school, expend all that energy, and then do it again the next day, and again the next day. Or even when they come home, oh no, now you're home, we expect you to behave like this, or as opposed to going, right, actually you've had enough. You need to go and regulate in your room, or you need to go and chill out under the duvet, or whatever it might be. We just don't pick up on that because we're judging against the wrong set of parameters. Whereas people like you and loads more people in kind of the modern day, I think, are beginning to realise actually there is a real thing about burnout and autistic, the amount of energy you expend in non-autistic friendly settings, and it's huge. And again, autistic people themselves often don't know. They're like, isn't that what everybody goes through? It's like, no, mate. Actually, most people just breathe, but because it is set up for the majority, so that's fine. But if you're not in that majority group, then you're likely to have to expend an awful lot more energy just to keep up with everybody else.
And I think as well, people sometimes when they hear about, say, energy accounting, they think it's one specific type of energy. But when you referred to the 9 energies, I was like, doesn't that make more sense? Isn't that more kind of clarifying that we're not just looking at, say, oh, I went out, so therefore that took a lot out of me. But actually, there's much more than just the social piece of I went out. It's
And
so layered.
and it's also the balance. So what one of them is fairly obviously physical energy. So I mentioned about doing triathlons. Like if I do all of my well, not all of my thinking. I do a lot of my thinking when I'm out running. Um, and like people say, oh, how can you write a book so quickly, like in a week or two? It's like, well, that's just the process of typing. The rest of it's
You've been
written.
processing it
I've
in
been
your
out,
head.
I guess so anyway, because that seems to be what happens. So it's not like I'm amazing or anything. It's like, but I spend hours out running, so it just all gets processed then, and then it all just sort of comes out on the keyboard. And so for me, you might be physically drained from going out for a decent run, but all of a sudden you've got massive amounts of mental energy as a direct result. So depending on what you're looking for that day or the day after or whatever, you can start tweaking where your energy is going based on that balance. Okay, well, what is it you need to achieve? What is it first of all, what do you need to achieve? Secondly, what is going to keep you safe? And thirdly, what do you want to achieve as an added bonus if that's possible as well? And again, having that understanding of self, it might be, actually today I just need to get through to tomorrow. I need congratulations, because I know that I'm pretty much running out of spoons already, and it's only 8 o'clock in the morning. Fine. If you get to the end of the day and you're not in a spoon deficit, you deserve an award, as opposed to, oh, you're bouncing around being really productive and the rest of the world goes, yeah, that's brilliant. It's like, well, yeah, it's not as good as yesterday actually, because I go to bed and I've still got loads of spoons, so actually I haven't done that well. I haven't used up all of the energy I could have done, whereas yesterday I got through the day based on almost no energy at all. So that's the other thing. Actually, I've got loads I could say to you, but the concept of being kind to yourself as well. Autistic people are very, 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 very poor, I think, in general, at being kind to
Same.
themselves. I think like that whole concept of empathy and hyper empathy and being outward looking rather than inward looking, I think there's a lot of truth to that for lots and lots of autistic people. And actually, I think one of the most amazing things to not to learn, because that would be patronizing, but to really buy into, is actually to be kind to other people. You do have to be kind to yourself first, because if you're not around for whatever reason, or you know, you don't have that capability or that energy because you've worn yourself down by doing everything for everybody else. Actually, looking after yourself is part of looking after other people. And I think that's an incredible kind of notion to buy into, and something that, to be honest, some autistic people aren't very good at doing, and that's why so many autistic people are brilliant advocates for other people. I bet you're like this actually, and rubbish advocates for themselves. It's like, well, actually, being a bit of an advocate for yourself is part of advocating for other people as well.
Maybe that's a chapter in your next book or the book after that, because as you're even saying that, I was thinking of something my dad used to say to me years and years ago. My dad would definitely be neurodivergent as well, and he would have said to me, I was always like a giver, and if someone was nice to me, I'd be like, no, just no, there's no need for that. But he would always say to me, he because I was always just like the helper and always helping everyone or doing whatever, and he would always say, Amanda, always try, if you can't, to keep a little bit back, because if you give all your kindness away, then you've no kindness left for yourself, and then where are you then? I obviously didn't listen to him because I ended up burning out many times over the course of my life, unfortunately. But is that, like, I suppose, and then there's the disassociation piece, because you're so focused outwardly on battling the ableism that you don't even see, but that you're trying to be what other people want you to be. Maybe that's where the high masking comes in as well, where you can't even identify that you have those. It's like I can't identify my own needs, even though clearly I have needs, but I don't even like from an energy level or just self-compassion level. I would always say, if something went wrong, I blame myself first. Or when I went, as an adult for an adult autism assessment, I was talking to I think he was he was a professor, but he was also a psychologist. And I was saying, God, there was this one time, and I've been thinking about it for 30 years. And he said, did you ever consider that it had nothing to do with you whatsoever? And perhaps the other person was just misunderstanding you as well, and nothing to do with you. And I was like, what? And like, I should have thought of that at least once over 30 years. And I'd never once considered that at any time I wasn't at fault. They were like, did you ever consider there's two people there? And I was like, oh, so yeah.
So that's amazing. Like lovely listeners or viewers or whatever you are. This isn't a setup. So I've literally, in a book that I've already written but hasn't been published yet.
Stop. Oh my God.
I've written. I love neologisms. So neologisms you probably know, but neologisms made up words, and so I created my own neologism based on concept called scrupulosity, which is essentially religious guilt. So I came up with scrupulosity, which is about that concept that you're always in the wrong. It's like so many autistic adults are like, oh, sorry. It's like, what do you mean, sorry? That you literally didn't have anything to do with that.
When I went for my adult autism assessment, he told me that in the first hour, because I must have said sorry so many times, that I had said sorry about 60 odd times in an hour. And he said, why? I remember him saying to me, why do you think you apologize? And I just said, oh, I always get things wrong, and I don't know why I get things wrong, but I don't even hear. I probably said it during this podcast. I don't even hear it, but he said I'd said sorry so many times that and then when he told me, I went, oh, I'm so sorry. He was like 51. I was like, sorry. He was like 53. And then I was like, oh my God. And he was just like, you don't need to apologize for who you are. And it was the first time anyone ever said that to me. And then I was like,
so there you go. You can nick my word, scrupulosity, and I do think it's a real thing. And
actually,
on
the poster update.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. But you wait till later on in the year when the book's published. But that's a real thing as well. And I think, again, it's when people are judging themselves against the wrong lens. So if you weren't an autistic person and that had happened, then maybe that would be problematic. But actually, being authentically autistic just meant that things do happen. And the other thing I'll tell you what, this is a fairly new concept to me, but it's just gorgeous. Everybody listening to this can go out and do this like for free, like overnight. And that's essentially refusing to accept an apology for somebody being their authentic self. So I'm part of a disability group. It doesn't matter where, but we have a zero tolerance. So if somebody rocks up to the group and go, oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't write up the minutes of last. I'm really sorry. I just hit burnout. It's like, well, we're not accepting that apology. That's just not a problem. You can explain why, but you can't apologize for being your authentic self. We're not accepting it. And the group, like when people first enter that, they're a group of adults. Like, nobody's ever said that to me before. Like, that I'm not allowed to apologize just for being who I am. And it just completely flips the narrative around understanding of, I don't want to use the word disability, but perceived disability, like about who you genuinely are. You shouldn't have to apologize for being autistic ever. You can apologize for all sorts of things, obviously, and autistic people can get things wrong, obviously, but you shouldn't ever have to be made to feel bad just because you're autistic. So that's where I came up with this concept, there's two concepts really, of scrupulosity and then zero tolerance for having to apologize for those
I
sorts of.
love it. But I think one thing that you actually had in one of your books that I thought was really, really interesting, but also I think from an educator's point of view would be really useful to consider is that the autistic constellation. So the way that everyone is misinterpreting, misunderstanding autism or what it is to be, as you say, what does an autistic person look like? But I think for families or for friends or people trying to understand an autistic person that is either said or it's known that the person's autistic, that piece that you developed around autistic constellation, I just thought goosebumps, like makes total sense to me. Like, do you feel like that can help educators when they're trying to understand the profile of a student? And as you say, like looking out to the stars, like it's changeable every night, but we know that there's key points of this is what an autistic person can be, but it's changeable as we all are dynamic.
So I love the idea of the constellation. I came across it through Caroline Hurst.
Yes.
I'm fairly sure she's the originator of the concept of the constellation. I think what I would add is a timeline to the
Okay.
constellation. So like you can have a snapshot of a constellation, but actually over time that will evolve and change and what have you. But a student of mine, another Caroline actually, and she appears in my the current book, which is published out later. Again, it sounds like we've done this on purpose, but we haven't. So she came up with the concept of the autistic donut, and I
Ooh.
just fell in love with it. And I immediately emailed her going, I'm just in the middle of writing a book. I should be marking your assignments, but I'm actually writing a book at the same time. And can I reference you and take this a few steps further? And at the time, I've always been, I love the concept. I love imagery. I love mathematics, and I love the concept of what appears to be oxymoronic concept of the infinite within a finite. And I was saying, right, so she was talking about the concept of donut, and like a donut is a shape, it's a three-dimensional shape. That's it. It's a finite shape. And then I love spirals as well, and if you start off a journey at one point in your donut and you go all the way around the donut and come back to that same point, there are infinite journeys you can take to go from A back to A. So your life is always, always, always going to have different variations, which I think is a gorgeous way of understanding the constellation on a day-to-day basis.
Mm.
And of course, you can have an infinite number of different donuts that all look different. The other thing that I loved about the concept of a donut is that you can have infinite variations of donuts, and that's really easy. It's like when people are like, oh, how, are autistic people, are they the same? Well, it's like, well, are all donuts the same? No, they're not. They're all different shapes and sizes. Some are really similar, some are completely different. You can have savory donuts, but you can link donuts together and you don't even have to touch each other, but they are all connected under the umbrella of being autistic. It's such a cool idea. So
But it makes a lot of sense as well, though, doesn't it? When you kind of place it in that framing, you're like, well, it makes it very, as I often think about all of your work, very like kind of logical. You're like, well, of course, why didn't someone say that to me sooner? Okay,
yeah,
so
I know, I agree. I feel unbelievably fraudulent, like saying half of the stuff I say, because I'm just like, well, surely everybody knows this already.
but
Like,
I don't think they do though, because when I literally always produce like, and again, I update it, so it's not always the same old tired slide that I made many years ago when I first started speaking about your incredible self. But anytime I put, they're like, oh my God, I'm applying that theory in my work every day, and I'm telling the SNAs, or the SNAs are telling the teacher, or the parent is telling the auntie, the uncle, or whoever it is. Like it really is making a huge difference. Then there's another theory that I wanted to refer to, and again, it was only when I was rereading quite literally the books over the last few days, I was like, why don't I use that theory as well in my slides? And it's the 3 R's. Do you want to explain what that is to anybody listening?
oh
Because I think
God,
that's
3 hours. Recognition, regulation, and resilience. I think
yes, and
that's
resilience
it.
is the no. Like we don't
And the
want
resilience
someone
of the
to.
donor. Because people are always like, oh, yes. So the whole point being recognize what the situation is, change it to make it suitable for yourself. And then you don't need to be resilient. I hate this concept of, oh, she's doing really well. She's ever so resilient. Well, why does she have to be resilient? Surely if she has to be resilient, something's going wrong. It's like when people go, oh, they're doing ever so well at school. We've put loads of coping strategies in place. It's like, well, you're clearly getting it wrong then. If you have to have coping strategies, like most other kids don't have to have coping strategies to exist at school. So why do you think it's okay to have to exist alongside coping strategies? You need to keep working and supporting the individual in a way so they don't need coping strategies. So yeah, that's where those 3 R's came into place. Yeah, the idea of total rejection of resilience.
But if I was a parent and I'm trying to help my teenager or my autistic child, a younger child, understand their autistic identity, is there any safe place to start? Or what would you say if I was a parent today saying, look, Luke, I need to tell Jack, I haven't told him up until now, he's 11 now, I need to tell him he's going off to secondary school. Where's a safe place to start, would say, with that kind of conversation?
So I think that's a brilliant question. I always think that you need three things to be in place. So one, the child has to have the intellectual ability to understand the concepts that you're going to be engaging with. Two, there needs to be a level of communication whereby that's possible. And three, there has to be some level of motivation. So sometimes people say, like you mentioned age, like sometimes people say, oh, what age is that? It's like, again, age is irrelevant. Like, you cannot force an autistic person to talk about autism when they don't want to. There's no point. In fact, you'll probably do more harm than good. It has to come from them. And that it might not be 11, it might not be 15, it might not be 21. It might be 31. Do you know what I mean? But until you've got those three, I think, I mean, just because I'm obsessed with things in sets of threes, but I think those three things are probably the three indicators. However, you can do, so, and not only can you, I think you should be doing all sorts of things beforehand so that when it comes to those concepts, there's shared comprehension. And I think this is a trick that we miss, like not just with talking about an autism identification and what that might mean to any given individual, but right across the board. So I quite often talk about Wittgenstein's lion and like saying, you know, if a lion was to join us on this amazing podcast, no, you're amazing. No, I wasn't trying to say that I was amazing. Like,
I think you are pretty amazing. It's okay to say, because I genuinely think you are.
Well, okay, that's very kind of you. But so lovely Wittgenstein's lion like pops into Zoom and starts chatting to us in a delightful, Irish accent, but in English. We still wouldn't be able to understand each other, even though we're using the same words and the same language. Still wouldn't. So life experiences are so completely different. And I think, I'm not saying that autistic people are different species before anybody gets cross with me about that. What I am saying is that life experience and the words that autistic people use to explain their life experiences might be the same. So the word masking is the most obvious example of all, because you talk to people about masking, and the predominant neurotype just go, yeah, but we mask all the time, you know. It's like, yeah, but that is not the same thing. It's the same word. It is not the same experience. Very rarely is it the same experience. Anyway, don't get me started on that. So, but I think if we've got shared understanding of the same terms, that puts us on a really good footing, especially if those concepts are neuroaffirmative. Now, you're not going to say to a 3-year-old, today we're going to talk about neuroaffirmative narratives. What you can do with a 3-year-old is introduce the word different, but in a way that's non-negative. And I think I've written about this elsewhere, but like I always talk about the bowl of fruit game, which I did once with a child. And like I cheated because I knew he liked fruit. So we had a bowl of fruit and it's full of apples and there's one orange. And it's like, what is this? Oh, it's a bowl of fruit. Okay, well, what's that? What's actually in it? It's like, oh, there's loads of apples. Oh, and there's one orange. Are apples and oranges, you know, what are they similar? It's like, yeah, they're similar. They all come under the umbrella of fruit. And what are the differences between apples and oranges? What are the similarities? Well, they're round. That one's orange. That one's green. Blah blah blah. So do we agree then that apples and oranges are different? Yeah, they are different. And then you can start talking about, well, does that make, just because the orange is in a minority, does that mean we like it any less? Do you like eating oranges any less just because there's only one in the bowl? No, that's a ridiculous thing to say. And then you take it a step further. So already you've got a concept of difference, minority, but not negativity. So, and then you take it to the next level using the child's imagination. And of course, autistic people have amazing imagination. It's like, oh well, imagine if they were real. They suddenly had life, and this orange lived in Apple Land where apples lived, and they all spoke Appleese, and the orange was expected to learn Appleese and teach itself Appleese, and nobody knew it was an orange. They all just assumed it was an apple that behaved in a rather different way because it behaves in an orangey way. Would life be more or less difficult for the oranges? Life could be quite hard to be an orange, but does that mean we like the orange any less? No, not at all. So again, you're developing these, and you can do this in all sorts of ways. You can do it by going down the park and looking at, you know, different types of trees, or going to the zoo and looking at different types of animals, whatever it might be. You can teach the concepts of minority, but not in a negative way. Disadvantage by being in a minority group, because we've got to be honest. Absolutely have to be honest. Is that it's like, oh, then what if the apples all then learned orange, and they allowed the orange to behave in an orangey way? Does it make any difference to the apples? Not really. Does it make life loads better for the orange? Absolutely. Then when it comes to it, age of 11, 15, 21, 31, it's like, look, mate, you're the orange. And all of a sudden it makes sense. And I think having that shared comprehension of the narrative, and it doesn't have to be actual language, it could be visual, it could be in a play, whatever suits your particular human, We can do those things literally from, or not literally from day one, but we can do that from a very, very young age, literally on a day-to-day
It
basis.
can be the family culture of acceptance,
Family culture,
broad acceptance
absolutely,
for all people.
absolutely, yeah. And just lastly, going back to the next book, which hopefully I'll be allowed to write. It's about understanding the autistic authentic self. So it is literally aimed at
Fab.
you as an autistic person, but also you as a teacher of an autistic child in your class, or you as a clinical psychologist or a therapist or whatever. So it's applicable. I'm not trying to sell the book.
No, do you
I'm
know what
just
I really
saying,
liked in your books was actually, and I love them all clearly because I've written all over them, but this one where you give like the profile of like how to understand and support, I was just like another genius move. Like it's so accessible. Like there, like you can say I've written on it, but like you literally, like I'm just like going, because when I say support someone, I'm thinking, have I thought of where's the theory? Like I think at some point you have to write maybe like an educator's guide, like specifically for schools. Maybe that's your 11th or 12th books. You need to get to the three again, maybe number 12. I feel like that would be a really beneficial book, but really practical. And maybe, I don't know, can you do that with Sheldon Press? But you know, the way with some publishers, you can get like a PDF or a QR code that they can take those frameworks instead of developing the frameworks. Like they just, you have it there as a QR and like they would use it instantly. I know they would. It would be fabulous. But listen, I'm going to stop you there now because I've literally taken up way more of your time than I had planned to. And I thank you for being so generous with your incredible time. So listen, I'll finish it there. But listen, a huge thank you to your fabulous self. I can't wait to buy all your books. I'll literally be your number one book buyer. The minute they come out, I always have them on pre-order the minute I see one come up. But listen, huge thank you to yourself. A huge thank you for being so gracious about my poorly drawn Luke Beard. Now that I see, I'm like, I got a lot of this wrong, but I tried. That's the main thing. But listen, huge thanks. Thanks for all of your knowledge base. Thank you for all of your fabulous books. I hope someday all of my shelves will be filled with all of your books that you're yet to write. I can't wait to read them when they do come along. But huge thanks. I know all of our listeners will be really thankful. And again, I'll put up some links and further information about where they can find out more about you, and also in particular the incredible work that you're doing at university level. So thank you very much.
thank you so much.